disperse immediately or you will be subject to arrest. Do it now.
A boss ain't nothing but a thief on a time loan. 128 bit war, you play Nintendo. On some shooter, so put the bridge down. Don't feed us to the killer bees. We get what we deserve. Like bury me with my MP3s. Write my manifesto in 72 DPI. Life's just a game. You got cheated, never learned. I write these songs for every bridge that ain't been burned. For every cop car that ain't been turned.
Welcome to This Is America, June 27th, 2022. We have a jam-packed episode for you this week. First up, we have a special interview with an inmate on hunger strike at the Santa Rita Jail in the Bay Area of California. The strike kicked off earlier this month over rising commissary food prices. We talk about the hunger strike and the tension that led to it and the state attempts to bury the news of the action. We then present a short update on the ongoing protest encampment in so-called Boise, Idaho, where members of the houseless community have launched a tent city to demand access to housing and an end to police harassment. In recent days, however, police have launched attacks on the encampment, taking blankets, sleeping bags, and heaters even from young children. We then turn towards an update from the Winnemucca Indian colony, where land defenders continue to resist attempted evictions of elders on native land. We discuss what has happened since we last spoke and how people can support the struggle. We then turn towards our discussion, where we offer up an analysis of the latest news on January 6th Commission reports, the midterms, and beyond. Also, if you value It's Going Down as an autonomous media resource in times of crisis and you want to support us, go to itsgoingdown.org/shop. Again, that's itsgoingdown.org/shop, where you can sign up to donate monthly or give us a one-time donation. You can also subscribe to our podcast, follow our RSS feed, listen to us on the radio, follow us on social media, and if you like this show, you can check out other anarchist podcasts on the Channel Zero Anarchist Podcast Network. That's going to do it for us. Enjoy the interviews and the discussion, and we will see you soon.
My name is David Vigil. I'm currently incarcerated in Santa Rita Jail. I've been incarcerated for over 6 years now.
Talk to us about what's going on. So there's been a hunger strike that's been going on for a while now. Why are people on hunger strike there?
Well, we started on the 8th of January, and we're protesting the poor quality of food that they give us here, and also the high prices of the commissary. So the food that they give us here is really disgusting. Most people don't even eat it at all. And so we supplement, not eating that with the commissary, because the prices are so high, and they were just raised recently. So, like, for instance, a single top ramen soup costs about 25 cents less in any store or any market, any grocery, but they charge us $1.13 for a single soup, and they just recently raised it to $1.32. That's over a 15% increase, and compared to prices on the outs, that's about like 500% price markup, and they've raised the prices on everything. They're also not taking our hunger strike seriously. At first, they weren't documenting it until we demanded them to. I think recently, Lieutenant Kelly is the spokesperson of this facility. He denied that there was even a hunger strike, even though there's documentation. And he also said that they only increased the prices of items on commissary by 5%. And that's completely untrue when there's not one item on there that has been raised to only 5%. At the minimum, it's 50%, and some have been increased to about 65%.
Yeah, you mentioned, for instance, the top ramens. I mean, on the outside, you could go to any store and get 4 or 5 top ramens for, $1.
Right.
Sometimes even more. So the fact that you're paying another 32 cents, for some people that may not seem like a lot, but can you explain just the impact on prisoners, just that increase?
it's not an extra 32 cents. They're charging $1.32 for a single suit. So it's about a 500% price markup. And, you know, really it's our families that are suffering. First of all, the situation is already stressful enough. You know, lawyer fees are very high. And then we need help, you know, buying commissary items just so we could be fed and be comfortable, because the food they give us here is so disgusting. And also the deputies here, they eat for free cafeteria. I passed by one time, there was this female deputy walking with a large plate of food, and the deputy that was escorting us asked her, so, you know, what's on the menu today? And she said, tamales, and she had a bunch of fruit and all kind of other things on her tray. And he was like, tamales again? So they're eating good, but they're feeding this food that would, like, you couldn't give it to homeless people to eat. I think if you were to feed people in a homeless shelter this type of food, I think they would be accused of cruelty. Most of the food goes to waste, so that's taxpayer money that's going to waste.
Yeah, from our understanding, there's supposedly rules that say that they have to provide at least a certain amount of caloric intake to people that are there. But tell us more about the food. I mean, just how bad it is. Any horror stories you want to share?
People have found rat feces in the food. Some of the food looks like slop and is like unrecognizable as food. It looks like dog food often. They have this lunch meat that I've only taken one bite of it when I first arrived here, and I've never touched it since, and most people don't eat it unless they're really starving. It doesn't look like any lunch meat I've ever seen on the outs. It smells so bad that I wouldn't even eat the bread that it touches. And, like, a lot of the hot trays that we get is just like I said, slop. And the vegetables that we get are always soggy. And even for those that can't afford commissary and only eat the food given here, they will still be hungry all day, every day, because the foods are so small. And most people eat commissary only, and there aren't enough healthy choices on there. There's just not that much of a variety anyway. And most people pay $175 a week, every week, just to eat comfortably and maintain proper hygiene with the commissary.
Yeah, it's not just like food, and like you said, there's not much variety. I was looking at a photo of the items that are for sale. That's on there's a website called Santa Rita Solidarity that has information, and we'll of course share that later in the program. But you know, it's like chips and stuff that you would find basically at a corner store or a bodega or something like that. But yeah, like you said, not a lot of healthy stuff, but also like the other items are, like you said, hygiene stuff that you all have to buy from them, which is marked up exponentially. Things like soap or deodorant or other stuff.
Right. And the prices are like higher than anything that you would see on the outs at any supermarket, any liquor store. So we're paying these exorbitant prices, but if you look at the brands, they're like, you recognize them anywhere. It's just, they give us the lowest quality stuff for the highest prices. We've been grievancing this. We filed grievances, and the sheriff's department, they say it's not their responsibility. Basically, it's not their, they're trying to cast all the blame on the vendor. And they're also legally liable because they're the ones that contract them. And not only that, for them to try to say that it has nothing to do with them when they receive 40% of the profits from us from every sale. I mean, basically there should be a criminal investigation because it's illegal what they're doing, illegal business practices, it's price gouging, usury, and it's a monopoly. We're going to buy from this one vendor, and they're taking advantage of the situation that we're in. We're not giving enough to feed us, we're not giving enough to maintain proper hygiene, so we're forced to purchase these items.
Well, do you want to tell us, how this became what it is now? How did you go from just being upset about this to spreading to other prisoners?
Well, to tell you the truth, I've been complaining about this since I arrived in 2015. It's been difficult to get everybody on the same page because really it's a big sacrifice to not eat, It's not easy. When we're in here, it's already stressful enough, and then to not be comfortable, not have enough food to eat, and not buy the extra things that make this time a little more terrible. But recently, I believe it was sometime at the end of December that they had the price increase. And like I said, the prices were already very high. A single top ramen soup was $1.13 to $1.32. Some items, like coffee, I believe was raised a whole nother $1. And it's not even a brand name coffee, it's some brand you wouldn't even hear about. So when they told us to this price increase, that's when people were really upset because we've already been paying so much that we came together, and I believe on the 8th, at least in the building, almost everybody, there was maybe a couple people that still receive their food, I think because they just really couldn't afford not to. So on the 8th of January, everyone came together and denied their food. And they had to throw all that food away. And it's a lot. There's about 200 inmates in one building. And the deputy was upset, but they didn't even document it. So we were on hunger strike for a couple of days, denying our food, and they weren't documenting it. But then they would start trying to retaliate against, because after that incident on the 8th, the very next day, they started saying, okay, well, who wants to come out for their food? If not, you have to stay in your cell, because we're supposed to be allowed 20 minutes for feeding time. And they started denying us that until we started grievancing it. Then they started laying us out like they were supposed to.
What's the significance of them not documenting it? What does that do?
If they don't document it, then no one knows the sacrifice that we're making.
Mm-hmm. Is that so like their superiors don't hear about it?
That also, and I mean, their spokesperson is still denying that there's even a hunger strike going on and hasn't documented.
So it doesn't get out to the media and people hear about it and all that stuff?
Hopefully, I believe there was a segment on KTU News, and now hopefully with you, more people will hear about the struggle we're in.
Well, what happened after the 8th? You said people came together and then they were refusing to document it. What happened after that point?
So a lot of people became discouraged because of that, and it's really a huge sacrifice to not eat. So a lot of people stopped their hunger strike and started eating, but there's still a solid core of us that are still pushing forward with this and still protesting, trying to get the word out about the conditions here. I believe that the price increase happened so they could pay for it. There's a lawsuit going on right now against this facility. It's called Idaho versus Ahern, and it's about how the deputies were torturing mentally ill patients, and the conditions there were far worse than, they're just terrible across the board here in this facility, but I guess we're really depriving them of their basic needs and mistreating them, abusing them. So they agreed to a settlement of I believe it's like $230 something million. So I think the price increase was to cover that, to cover what they're going to have to pay for if it passes.
What else do you want people to know that are listening to this?
I want people to know that this type of situation can happen to anybody. This is not a penitentiary where we're paying a penance for our crimes. This is a holding facility. Mm-hmm. So anyone accused of a crime can find themselves here and be mistreated and used the way we are. And we're just asking that people reach out to the county officials. I believe the people that are responsible or have an authority over this facility is the board of supervisors. So, reach out, speak to your board of supervisors and let them know that there needs to be a change. They need to stop profiteering from our suffering, and there needs to be serious change in this facility. So they gave us these tablets, which is good, but the prices on that are also so high that so we're locked down most of the day. At the most, we get 4 hours a day out of our cell. So, but often we're denied that, and so we're locked down about 20 hours a day, sometimes more. Sometimes we're locked down all day for a couple of days in a row. And we're in here with nothing to do. There's no type of programs. We can't work. We can't attend classes. They have some classes now that are on the tablet, but it's like in person, and it's not like Zoom or anything. I think you just have to basically call them if you need any help, and they send you these packets. So there's nothing to do to entertain us or pass the time or be productive at all. So they offer us, like, there's some apps on the tablet that you could purchase. So, for instance, there's Pluto TV, but to access that app, it's 5 cents a minute. So if you were to watch a 3-hour movie, that's $9. And this app is free. Most of the apps they have on there are free. The only time you pay for a subscription for these apps is if you want the better quality service. So you would still have to have your family purchase these subscriptions on top of the money you're paying for this. And I believe then they have these other movies that are completely outdated, and they charge you like $8 a day. So and they'll let you buy a monthly subscription. So if you were to purchase that $8 a day for a month, that's $240 a month. When you could think of, like, say, Netflix, that's like $10, $12 a month. Compare that to $140 a month. Or for music, it's $5 a day. That's $150 a month. And to get the full access of, they offer iHeartRadio. To get the full access of that, your family still has to buy the subscription on the outs for $10 a month. And think about that. It costs $10 a month for everyone else. For us, it costs $150 a month. So there's just a lot of injustice, and we're trying to get righted.
Hey y'all, here's an update from our protest camp in Boise, Idaho. We got raided by the police today. Belongings were stolen. Survival gear was taken. One of our community members was arrested by the police. Here we have some of the other community members to talk about what was taken from them.
Some of our blankets were taken. Some of our heaters were taken out of our tents. They went through our tents and took some of our stuff out of there, especially some of our kids' stuff. I know personally our belongings, like our blankets, and a couple blankets didn't even belong to us, actually belonged to a friend of ours that let us use them.
I was here this morning and numerous Idaho State police officers showed up. They went through the camp, picking up tents, and anything they found in the tents, they were seasoned and putting in boxes. They took blankets out of everybody's tents, heaters, tarps. Let's see, what else? They made a couple people collapse their tents down and move their tents. Again, they went through everybody's tents looking for people. And when they found people, they made them come out of their tents, search the tents. Never, ever, that I know of, presented a warrant or anything allowing them to do this. They failed to realize the true impact of the stress that they put on everybody. There's incidences of anxiety attacks. With me, I'm covered head to toe in a rash from stress, and we need to hold them accountable.
Well, they woke me up, told me to get out of the tent and to go in and get all my belongings before they take it all. They just basically took other friends of mine stuff by illegally going in their tent. They had no right going in their tent without a search warrant. So they are acting and violating our Fourth Amendment. So I think they need to look at what they did and regroup. That's what we're all going. That's our main thing for this campaign, is because they are taking our stuff and not giving it back to us. Or if it's not worth $25, they won't give it back to you. So we're losing stuff that is valuable to us, that means something to us, that we'll never see again. And pictures of my family and stuff I'll never see again.
Did they leave anything for you to stay warm with?
No, they did not.
Just one blanket?
No, they didn't leave me nothing.
They didn't leave you even one blanket? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Z. Me and my friend, we were just doing our own thing this morning to get a call that police were down here fucking with people's stuff. And me and my friends rushed down here as quick as we could, and we got down here to discover that they had already gone through tents, taken people's blankets, heaters, stuff that people needed to stay warm out here. And there was also no paperwork provided when they did this, and that just ain't right.
Same thing, and we got a call this morning stating that ISP was down here going through everybody's shit and taking all the heaters, blankets, sleeping bags, hand warmers, basic survival gear to stay warm and stay safe. And he said it just ain't right for them to do that. They didn't provide any search warrant or anything.
When you sleep, no one is homeless. When you sleep, you can't feel the hunger. When you sleep, no one is lonely in a dream. Without classes, without nations. When you sleep, oh, she's standing there with open arms, and one night could last forever. And if you asked her, she'd never let go. And you'd stay forever. And the sun's always rising in the sky somewhere. And if young hearts should explode from all the lies they've been told, let the new night bring you peace and the promise of tomorrow, where we can wake to a new beginning tomorrow. I'll all but have lost their faces, my friends and family, sweet memories, and the times we should have lived. And tomorrow, America just might fall apart. Tomorrow, tell me, where will sun's always rising in the sky somewhere. And if young hearts should explode from all the lies they've been told, to live through one night like this, I would trade it for the silence.
My name's Kiwani. I'm from Warm Springs, Oregon.
I'm just one of the land defenders here. I'm Lavelle Brown from Winnemucca Indian Colony.
So the last time we talked, it was maybe 3 weeks, a month ago. Do you just want to kind of go back to that period and tell us what's been happening over the last couple of weeks?
Well, since then, it's been a lot, really, but I don't even know where to start. Like you said, we do have the BIAs. They are coming back in here, and the last time that they were in here, they told us, that if we stand in their way one more time, they're going to start arresting people. So it's I believe it's getting down to the point now, to where things are going to start getting real around here. We feel like, because we've been getting a real bad vibe from them anyway. Like you said earlier, they're staged in the parking lot of I forget the name of it, but it's a senior center. It's I believe assisted living center up in the parking lot above the colony. It kind of overlooks the colony, and they have a parking lot up there that overlooks pretty much the whole colony, but it has a really good view of the community center. And just park up there all day long, let their dog out, and, I don't know, we feel like it's, like harassment tactics. Kind of like the Nazis did, that kind of a thing. It's the same behaviors. And, they've been coming in more and more. And, there's a handful of protectors here, but we're at the point where, we're kind of picking and choosing our battles, because we don't want to ever forget and put at the back why we're really here. You know what I mean? And that's for these elders and for these homes. So, like with the BIA and all these other little things, we gotta be we gotta be on our toes, so to say, because we can't afford to lose any of our defenders right now, because, we're getting kind of thin, and so, with that's kind of where that's going. And, just a couple of behaviors from, just like other people on the outside that just like, we feel like are just like attacking us and things like that. It's just, it opens the doors for things like that. When it's, what I'm saying? Just things that don't need to be really, energy don't need to be put into it, things like that. That's when things like that happen, such as the BIA. And that's pretty much why they're here, and they're just making things worse.
Yeah, we've been dealing with, basically what people deal with in all movement spaces. Patriarchy, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, people coming in who are doing that shit, and it's not okay. And, there's no room for any of that bullshit in our movement, because that just holds us back, and it's not right. And we're trying to move forward here in a good way. So I just want to say, if people aren't willing to unlearn those things, then they shouldn't be in the movement, because there's no room for that.
I had something to say about the BIA too. When BIA is around, all they do is harass the land protectors, and they're just there trying to protect the land and the homes and the elders, and here they come and they try to harass people. They even lay their hands on them or shove them around, and which they shouldn't be doing. They're there. The BIA is supposed to be there to protect people, not go and start laying their hands on people. And that's like police brutality, or they just want them to react so they could throw them in jail or whatever they say, but then they actually don't throw them in jail. I don't get that.
Yeah, because the BIA still don't have jurisdiction here. They still haven't been able to prove otherwise, like through court paperwork that they do, because they gave up their jurisdiction here a while ago, so they're not even supposed to be here. So I think they're just trying to intimidate and harass us and scare us, but that's what they want us to do. They want us to be fearful. But fuck the BIA, they've never been here to help us. You know, they've always just been a tool of the colonizer, and just so, yeah.
It's like we've been saying over and over again that the BIA is just another part of law enforcement, and law enforcement has proven to be nothing but security for multi-million-dollar corporations. And in this case, the BIA is security for a multi-million-dollar corporation right here, and it's all connected to the lithium mines that's taking place, and that's what we believe is why they're trying to do this, because they want to make homes for white miners, and they want to eliminate this colony from what it is and just open it up into, just so they could charge rent. And I mean, it goes back to that, you know what I mean? And that's what the BIA is doing here. And they try to come here and try to tell us, that they're here for felonies and this and that and everything like that. But the truth is, the only time they really come in here is when it's gonna benefit the corporations, really, or Rojo, or whoever it is that it's really just coming in here and trying to cause problems in here, and we know that the whole purpose of this whole thing, is that
BIA's here right now.
Hold on real quick.
For sure.
We might have to put this interview on hold.
For sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so back to what I was saying though, we had just the way things are here, me and my partner, we come and go, and as much as we can, but for the most part, we kind of just been right here, helping keep the fire going and, helping where we can, doing things. But, one of the times that we left, came back, we weren't gone that long, we came back. The BIA were coming through, because when we first came, we pushed them out, and they were coming back in, and they were trying to say something about an agreement or something. So, we made another stand and we pushed them back out, and we had them, held out, and they, there was a good little spell that they weren't coming through, and just somewhere along the way, a few buttons were pushed, so to say, or something, and then now they're back in here and they're driving through. Like I said, there really ain't enough of us to really, to do two battles like that, like with them, which is basically the same, because we know they work with them, but on their patrols, we just kind of been not bothering them too much, and just leaving them alone. But, we're kind of, I don't know, we're kind of stuck at that point, because we don't like them, they make us really uncomfortable coming in here like that.
I think, one reason they've been spying on us and trying to, do surveillance on us a lot more, too, is because the community has taken back the community center. And, Judy Rojo tried to turn the community center into a jail and courtroom. So the community took it back, decolonized it. The elders play bingo in there. They all meet in there. We have a kitchen in there. There's a medic station in there, So it's being used how a community shelter should be used. We have round dances in there. And they don't like that we have that community center.
Is the BIA just showing up on their own accord, or are they being called by certain forces?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that either. I don't really know how to answer that. I choose to not answer that one.
Okay, I just meant is Judy Rojo calling them, or are they just showing up because they know what's going on and they're trying to shut it down?
Yeah, that. I think probably a combination of both,
Yeah.
As BIA, about a week ago, just declared, or whatever the word for that is, Judy Rojo interim chairwoman. So, I think it's a little bit of both.
Since we last talked, have they attacked any more people's homes, or has that they haven't been able to do that?
They came to do. They have 2 homes that they're working on in the colony, kind of in the area that they bulldozed another person's home. But they have 2 homes they're working on, and they came to try to do construction on it. So, one land defender locked down to the machines, and then people came and stopped them from doing work, and then told them to leave, and that was successful. And they haven't been back since to try to do construction.
Even after Rojo got her interim back or whatever, they still haven't been back. But that's kind of why basically we've been on high alert. But once we had a land defender go up there and lock down to their machinery, they know we're not fucking around. So they haven't really been trying to push our buttons too much, other than the BIA. But the construction company and Rojo and them, they haven't really been trying to push our buttons too bad, other than the disrespectful comments and things like that towards our elders. But, mainly the main problem is just the BIA right now at the moment.
Except for so there's another part of the colony that's not really part of the colony, but there's 320 acres, that's up the ways a little bit, that's colony land. And they've been doing construction up there, building more homes and whatnot. They say they're building a tribal administration building, but who knows, because they lie all the time. But we haven't been able really to go up there and stop that because we're focused on just protecting these homes. We feel like if we go up there and try to do something, they can come down here. So, we just have to pick our battles. And, right now that's making sure we defend these homes.
You mentioned that people reclaimed a community center, and there's also been a lot of photos of kind of like stuff that you all have built in the camp. Do you just want to talk about kind of like day-to-day stuff and how people are taking back the space?
Yeah, we've been through a lot here. Like in our little community here. It's had its ups and its downs, but brought all this back. I'm not sure if when the last time we talked to each other, if not, we had built the prayer fire, but we have that going, and it's been going consistently for about a month, huh?
2 months.
About 2 months. It's been going, we have that going over there, so we have a place of prayer. So that, that's our main focus here. And that's always been, like, for me, it's, that's been like my goal is to mainly just bring love and rejuvenation into this community the best way we can, just as what we can bring as human beings, because we're all equal here, and so whatever it is that we hold and we carry, we can bring to the table and just try to help this community the best way we can. So with that, we take it to that spirit fire every morning as a community. And we group up over there and we hold prayer. We have prayer, everybody. And, sometimes we'll sing a song or sometimes we'll take a morning walk as a group, and just, from that point on, we just build the day. And now we've been, creating schedules, in which there will be a list of, things to do, chores, and we'll put it up on the board and people will sign their names on who can do this or who can do that, and it's been a goal to just rebuild this community. And there's trailers across the way over here. I believe Lavelle, who's on the line, that's her trailer. We've reskirted it. We've had people have come to reskirt it, and we're working on that plumbing. And small things that are being built. Like it was said, that community center, we decolonized it because they had bars and screens and cells and, they had, like a little courtroom set up with the little, like the podium and the whole works. When we first got in there and we looked around, we got to work and decolonized it. Took all the bars off, took all the screens off, cleaned it up. It's really nice now. There's murals. There's a real nice mural on the wall, We had round dance, we had round dances, we've had prayer, at least once a day, the community will go down there and we'll all sit down and eat together, and talk, things like that, I mean, COVID, we are practicing COVID, precautions as well too, because, we're here with these elders, so I mean, just let that be known too, when I say that we gather as a community, because it's really small, and the ones that are here, we're all pretty much together all the time, every day anyway. So, I mean, and then we, there's been a lot of rapid tests being taken and things like that. We just want to make that clear. But with that said, we've done that, and there's people on a day-to-day basis that's basically, cutting wood, hauling wood, chopping wood, cleaning. We're trying to keep this area clean. People are on watch, on both gates to, just kind of keep an eye on things. We're not stopping people, holding people in or out, it's at its free will. We're just kind of trying to keep an eye on things, and just seeing, we see, red and blues, or we see machinery, then that's a red alert. It's always a red alert. We let everybody know right away. And we just try to keep it that way. Just try to keep it positive, and on a day-to-day basis, we're like all of us are continually making it, consistent practice, to just, and not a consistent practice, but just a part of our day-to-day life, just to spend as much time as we can with these elders and just talk to them and help them, ask them what they need, things like that, cause I mean, they do a lot for us too. I ain't gonna lie. These are I'm saying, it's just because they cook for us, they clean for us. And they go to bat for us. They're really awesome and special. To us. We hold them really high, and it's a really beautiful place to be when it's like this. And we can all just be as one like this. And that's kind of basically where we're at right now, just, we got ceremonies coming up, and, we have a sweat lodge here, and, but the only thing is, so, I mean, that's one thing that we really do need is firewood, because, so we can sweat and things like that, and like the wood is limited. But, other than that, that's what it is. We're focused on prayer. We're here under the 1978 Freedom Religious Act. Therefore, if they do come here, they're violating their own laws, because we're in full prayer, and we conduct ourselves in that manner. There's no drugs or alcohol, and we practice, carrying ourselves in a prayerful way, which means, we're decolonizing here. We don't look down on nobody. We love all of our relatives equally, and we reach out and accept our two-spirit and trans, non-binary relatives with open arms here, because, that's what we're doing here. We're decolonizing, and, we accept everybody for who they are and what they are. And with that said, we have a vetting process too, because we want a safe space, and we want to keep that here for our relatives, for all our relatives. We want them to be safe here. So, that's kind of like our main focus, is a safe space in a prayerful manner, and usually when it comes to these kind of, fronts, these battle fronts, these front lines right here, when you go there, that's mainly what you'll see is our two-spirit, trans non-binary relatives will be standing right there on the front lines with us. You know what I'm saying? So, I want to acknowledge that, you know what I'm saying? That, we love them and we appreciate them, and we have, we accept them with open arms here. And, like with that, we're not related to any of that, those crazy old, whatever you call them, organizations or whatever that are up there on those hills that are, trying to make money on our people, and it's not, we're not related to that. We're not connected to that. You know what I'm saying? We're here out of the goodness of our hearts, because these elders want us here, and this is a fight that's in our backyard, right here. So like in reality, that's why we're here. We were asked to be here, so, with that said, that's kind of basically where we are right now.
Oh, and I'd like to say, like, COVID, like right now, I'm in isolation, and I'm away from everybody in the camp. And I think that Judy Rojo thinks that the COVID's all over and she could push people out of their homes and whatever she does. But it's really not over. It's still there. And the way everybody keeps themselves safe at camp, and I'm away from them at camp, I'd like to thank everybody that's there, the supporters, everybody. And to me, I don't care who you are, what you are. I'm pretty open-minded, and I care for each and every one of the land protectors there. I think of them as my children. So whenever I go to the store, I always say, what do the kids want when I'm buying stuff or something? I'm really appreciative of what they're doing there. They're taking care of the elders, and they do things. They cook for them. They really watch out for them. And I don't know what we'd do without them.
Lavelle, do you want to talk about your story and what happened with your home?
Sure. Well, Judy Rojo, the chairman, we always didn't accept her as our chairman, but she, her and her crew, Bob McNichols, she had Bob because she put out an eviction for everybody to get moved off the colony. And it's kind of hard for me to talk about, but anyways, they came and tore all the skirtings off my trailer, and they broke up all my water lines, and they took out my gas meter and broke things up to where my house wouldn't be livable. And then they were like, you're going to be evicted, you have to leave, and all kinds of stuff, but I stayed. And that's kind of what they did to me, was to take all my main sources out of the house, so then I wouldn't be able to live in my house and stay there. But I managed, I could camp, so it was really nothing. But then it started getting really colder, and I couldn't do it. And then my daughter asked me to move in with her, and she lives in Elko, so I started working here. And that's kind of how I am. But on my days off, I would go home there in Winnemucca for a bit, and then come back to work. But that was her way of trying to get me out of there. But I'm still there. I mean, I'll stay there because that's my home. I've been there for 45 years. I was raised there since I was 10 years old. And my mom and dad, they went to the council, they got permission there. So that's how I ended up there. I grew up there, and then I had a daughter, and now she's a mother, so we have 4 generations there in Winnemucca. And all my brothers and sisters are there in Winnemucca also, on the colony. So there's a lot of people here, and they're pretty much all older people, and they usually take care of their grandchildren. They have a lot of kids there, younger kids with them. So that community is more like elders and children. And that's what I gotta say about that part. But I am really grateful that the land protectors are there. When they came, we were all fenced in, and still right now, the fencing around the colony, it doesn't feel right to me. It should be torn all the way down, because it's like we're inside like jail or criminals or zoo animals or something. Because it shouldn't be fenced off like that, like how she has barbed wires on top. Like, it shouldn't be that way. Especially like for a native community to have it like that, I don't think that's right. Oh, when the protectors came, they took down the main gateways because we were blocked in. Nobody could go in and out. And not even like it had keep out or no trespassing signs, so people would see that and wouldn't go in, or they wouldn't come into the colony. And then the elders were getting their food from the senior center. They would drive it into the colony, but when they seen those signs, they quit. So it's like Judy Rojo was blocking their food coming in, and also like ambulances, or if they needed the fire engine or something, they wouldn't come either because they seen the signs and no trespassing, will be prosecuted, and all kinds of stuff on her signs. And which I think that a chairwoman shouldn't have written, out there, or a chairperson have that written on the colony. I mean, it should be welcome to the Winnemucca Indian Colony, something friendly, not like you'll be prosecuted and all kinds of stuff. But it was like a bad place to be first time. Like, you were blocked in, you had to show IDs to go in to prove that you did live there, and you had to have an ID that had your home address on it to get in and out. And then they would just let you a little ways, let you in and open the gate up a little bit, and you could drive in, and just stuff like that. It was like we were prisoners there. And then when the land protectors came, they took all the fences down, and you should have seen that day. It was like probably one of the best days there, because everybody was like going to town and driving around. That's why I'm really grateful that they did come when they did, and they pushed off the bulldozers. The bulldozers were there, and they pushed them all off.
What are you asking for in terms of support?
Like, for me, I'm thinking they need, or stuff needed is more firewood, because they have ceremonies coming up, and we need a lot of firewood in ceremonies. And also maybe even in support, like support-wise, I don't know about, like, supporters. They probably could come also. We probably always need more. But you would have to ask the crew there.
Yeah, like she said, firewood is mainly like what we could really use, because it's cold time. But not only that, it's like she said, we have ceremonies. We try to sweat as much as we can, but right now we've been kind of held back because of the wood situation, and we're limited on places to get it here. So, and that's a lot to ask, but it's firewood, and it's for ceremony. So that's like mainly the main thing, does anybody want to speak on donations? I'm not one to speak on, people coming. I'll leave that to the local people of this land. I'm from up the valley, up the ways of the way. So it's not my place to speak on that. You know what I mean? But, I'll speak on the firewood, and my comrades speak on the donations.
Yeah, I would say, just to check us out follow the camp on, Instagram or Facebook to keep up with it. It's called, New Indian Sokapa. And yeah, you can find all the information there for vetting and, supply needs and donations and things like that.
I just want to say, fuck transphobia, fuck homophobia, fuck abusers, fuck misogyny. That stuff has no space in our movements. I also want to say that Two Spirit Nation has always held down the front lines. Geronimo, the great warrior, he was able to do what he did because one of his Two Spirit people who were part of his warrior group, she was a seer, and she was able to see, where the enemy was. And that's how Geronimo and his group were able to elude capture so many times. Crazy Horse got his name from a Two-Spirit person. So Two-Spirit people have always been here, will always continue to be here, and we're always gonna be holding down the front line. So when we say protect the land, defend the land, you know, protect the sacred. That includes, you know, honoring, you know, Two-Spirit Nation and what they've always done. And so, yeah.
And I want to say too that here in our camp, it's been you know, real peaceful, and we've been trying to keep it that way. And at the moment, we're not flying no flags because, you know, and you know, I'm gonna say this with the whole of my heart because you know, my family, you know, we're AIM, American Indian Movement. My dad, you know what I'm saying, is American Indian Movement, and I grew up that way, you know. So I say this with all due respect. I have no disrespect towards the American Indian Movement. I have nothing against them. But when people come here and, you know, and they use that and they stand behind that in a way, in a misogynistic way to bully our women and our two-spirits here, you know, and that's not welcome. And that's why we took all our flags down, because we had a conflict with the flag. And one flag in particular caused a lot of problems. With that, we took all of our flags down, even my own home tribal flag. And we're keeping it that way, you know. And you know, we are who we are, you know. When we come from where we come from, we know who we are, you know, and we love our people. You know, I was told by my auntie, you know, to be AIM, you know, is to, if you believe in standing up for the rights of your people, you believe in standing up for yourself, you believe in your elders, you believe in prayer, then you're automatically AIM. That's what I was told when I was a little boy, and I asked my auntie, her name's Neelock Butler, I asked her what it would mean to be AIM, and that was what she told me, you know, because, you know, my question was, you know, is AIM, is it a biker gang? You know, is it a gang? Is it a clique? What is it, you know? And that was what she told me. My late auntie, her name was Neelock Butler. So, you know, with that said, you know, I always just keep that because, you know, my AIM is in my heart. That's where it's at, you know, and I come here on behalf of my elders, just like my uncles and aunties did in the 70s, you know, because that's what it's all about. You know, it's not about wagging a flag in somebody's face and to bully them, or, you know, to have a higher ground, or, you know, you got to report to me, you know, no. You know, it's in your heart, you know, and that's why we took our flags down, because our flags are in our heart, you know what I mean? And we keep it that way, you know, and we want a safe space for all of our relatives here, you know, all of them, you know, all of our relatives that come and help us, you know, and, you know, I mean, and with that, in regards to that, you know, I mean, if people want to support, you know, and they do the vetting process, whatever, you know, just please just keep in mind on the COVID and all that too, you know, because it's real important, because it's the elders community, and there's seniors that have grandchildren that live here, and that's basically the majority of this community is just elders and grandchildren of people who live here. So just keep that in mind, you know, and the violence and all that, you know, just maybe, you know, just leave that at the gate, because we want a safe space here for relatives.
Well, thank you so much for joining us once again. I know there was a huge response the last time people were on, and I hope we get the same response this time, and hopefully people listening to this can support. We'll definitely include some links to ways that people can donate and help out. And again, thanks for coming on. Anything else you want to say?
Thank you for your support and your help.
I would like to say thank you again to the land protectors, because they are the best for us right now. They've been doing really well for us. And thank you.
Thank you for all the love and support to all of our relatives out there.
So I saved my desperation.
one thing just to get started, we're going to be talking this week about sort of all the Trump news, J6, and also midterms, kind of like looking at the tea leaves and what all that means. I was listening to Robert Evans' latest podcast on the J6 anniversary, and kind of a blow by blow, he goes through basically the leading figures. He talks about Stuart Rhodes. Also, they do a deep dive on Ali Alexander and sort of his major role, which I think was super important, and that's something that kind of gets really kind of overlooked. But I thought it was fascinating and really poignant, and this is something I feel like even on this show we haven't really hit home enough. They basically open up and they talk about this one case of white mobs attacking this town of free blacks.
Right.
They basically centered the January 6th insurrection within sort of this history of reactionary white violence. And I think that there's been an attempt to basically define January 6th basically as like the predictable outcome of either conspiracy theories or the growth of like the fascist far right or even like Trumpism or MAGA, which, I mean, there's truth in all of those things, but I think that they actually made a really, really solid point in saying like, no, this is part of a much longer history of this white insurgent violence against what they termed like a multiracial democracy. But I mean, we could go farther and just say like, this is the white supremacist, the core belly of this society basically rearing its ugly head again and again at any sort of black autonomy, wealth, political power, anything like that. And just like constantly throughout history, I mean, whether we're talking about the attack on like Black Wall Street or lynch mobs in the South, again and again, like, after Reconstruction, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan to stop people from voting. It's so interesting to look at January 6th in that context, but then also compare that to the Democrats' failure to pass the Voting Rights Act. It's just so interesting that both parties are doing that in different ways. I mean, Biden came out, what was it, last week and said, I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I'm going to fight.
Right.
And everyone was laughing at that, saying like, look, it's already over, dude. Like, you have people within your own party who have already come out and said they're not going to vote for it. The Republicans are going to push back against it. You did nothing to push back against the filibuster, so you have no weapons to push this through. Like, it's over.
Yeah, well, and, one of the major points that's made in that series, which the series is called Assault on America. I think it's 8 parts. I listened through it just in the last week or so, and really do encourage everyone to do that. But there's this underlying narrative that regardless of things like voting rights bills, right? Really the place in which voting and political participation is impacted is not even necessarily on the plane of law. They talk about, I think it was Greensboro, North Carolina, where there was a literal coup where a black-led city administration had been elected. This was during Reconstruction, and a white mob showed up with guns and overthrew them and installed themselves in power. That's obviously illegal. That's against every single law that's on the books, but it doesn't actually matter. Because at the end of the day, the point that they make, and this point is made, I think, increasingly by people who are starting to analyze structures like the filibuster, things like this, the concept of states' rights, the whole like lost cause narrative, right? All of that is really grounded on this idea that electoral democracy is fine if you win. But then it's not okay when you don't win. And when that becomes racialized, essentially what that means is that electoral democracy is okay if you stay in power and is not okay if you fail. That underscores everything. And this is a point that we've made on this show a number of times, but, electoral democracy is a fiction, right? It's a mythological, naive concept of the state. It's this notion that the state limits itself, or this notion that somehow we are in control of the entity that has all the guns, right? That somehow we are sovereign, yet we still have to follow laws. It makes no sense. It philosophically makes no sense, and very practically fails in the exact situations that they're talking about in the first episode of this series, and which a lot of people have sort of started to talk about around questions like the filibuster, right? Like the filibuster exists and was used very sparingly until the civil rights movement. And then all of a sudden, it got protected and sanctified and used by white senators as a way to shut down debates about civil rights bills. Specifically, the famous example is Strom Thurmond filibustering the Voting Rights Act, which he did for, I think it was like 2 days or something like that. Back then, you had to speak the whole time during your filibuster. You couldn't just file a filibuster and walk away. You had to actually stand on a podium and speak the whole time, which is always a kind of interesting thing to watch. But the filibuster was very specifically structured to preserve white supremacy. And so at the point in which the entire underlying structure through which the elections happen on top of is in itself directly tied to and dependent on colonialism, the idea that there are elections doesn't really particularly matter, because at some point, well, if you know, there is a sort of mass of white folks who want to maintain their ability to hold power, well, there's a long history in the United States of white mobs like exceeding the law to really extreme degrees in order to stay in power and facing zero consequences for it. That's the underlying message of this thing. So when we're watching January 6th, yes, it was a coup attempt. Yes, it was an attempt to subvert an election. Of course, that is absolutely not the first time that has happened in incredibly similar circumstances. It is the first time it's happened in Washington, D.C., but it is not the first time that has happened in the United States. And so we absolutely have to start to position January 6th in that broader understanding. I think some people have tried to do that to more or less of a degree. I think this series really hits on that really effectively. And I know that there are some scholars out there writing some really amazing stuff that kind of touch on these sort of themes too. And so I really encourage people to kind of dive into those sorts of narratives to really kind of understand our history. I think Americans suffer from historical amnesia, often willful historical amnesia. And really a lot of what has gone on in the last 15 or 20 years of radical activity, one of the major elements of that has been reclaiming history. Not the good parts, but all of it. And being able to tell those stories again, being able to know how we got here. Americans forgot that very intentionally after the Second World War. And what we are doing partially in this process of political struggle is dragging that history back up to the surface again to force us to have to confront it. January 6th is no exception to that.
There's been a lot of news about people being subpoenaed for the January 6th commission. Also, Trump is in a lot of hot water. Let's unpack it.
Yeah, so I think we have to see this in light of a series of other subpoenas that have also been issued recently, specifically for Trump's legal team. Giuliani has been subpoenaed. Mark Meadows has been subpoenaed, right? The former White House chief of staff. I think and a number of participants, Robert Epps, who is a militia person from Arizona, who Ted Cruz accused of being an FBI infiltrator during a congressional hearing like 2 weeks ago. He is very much a militia person and not an FBI infiltrator. He has been subpoenaed and he's going to testify. A number of people have handed over large amounts of documents recently, including Stephanie Grisham and people who were sort of White House staff that have kind of abandoned Trump. They've been turning things over. And then we have the Oath Keepers indictment. And so all of those things tend to indicate a bit of a shift. So what we saw at the beginning of the January 6th commission was and this was kind of the boring part, right? This was the part where we were like, oh, this doesn't mean anything yet. Maybe they'll get to something interesting later. But for right now, they're just kind of rehashing what happened. The first phase was really them kind of trying to build a narrative of what happened that day, right? Which was a narrative that they had already been sort of propelling forward. They were just sort of building what, you know, in legal speak would be called the theory of the case, right? They're kind of like starting to build the foundations of that. The next phase that they moved into is they started looking at financial networks. How did the money get there, right? Who funded this thing? Who funded the Stop the Steal tour that happened before that? Where did Ali Alexander get money from? How did the people who ran the rally get money for all those sound systems? And like, we already found out some really interesting stuff. Like, for example, I forget her name, who is the heiress to the Kroger's grocery store fortune, who lives in Italy is not even living in the United States, but lives in Italy, gave Alex Jones like $6 million for January 6th. And that was something like 80% of all the money that was used, right? From one person funneled through Alex Jones into a network of otherwise, more or less connected, well-resourced political operatives, right? Which is not a circle of people that Alex Jones tends to interact with. And that brought forward a lot of really fascinating elements of how the right wing is structured right now, which, what we're starting to see is how fringe elements of the right wing are using resources from fringe funders to gain influence in these mainstream circles, right? So circles tied to the Republican Party, in ways that they never had influence before, right? And how that had a lot to do with how January 6th developed as an event and how the events preceding that developed, right? So starting, with the election and moving forward, we saw this escalation happening. And really the second phase was understanding what happened during that escalation process, right? Who was running the show in Olympia when, the Proud Boys and militia people tried to storm the State House there? Does that have any connection to what happened in Michigan when people tried to storm the State House there? Right. What is the connection to groups like the Oath Keepers, right? Like all of this was sort of being investigated, and they were really able to hone in on people like Ali Alexander, who probably most people who listen to the show have no idea who that is. But Ali Alexander is a Republican operative from Arizona. I forget what his birth name is. It's not Ali Alexander. He changed his name at some point. And he sort of is one of these people that came up through the part of the Republican Party that's really close to Roger Stone. And Roger Stone was one of his sort of mentors. And so he kind of plays in the same world of sort of, political dirty tricks that often cross into illegality. The other claim to fame he has is he is at Ali on Twitter. He was one of the really early adopters of Twitter, and gained power in Republican circles by being a sort of digital media consultant. He linked up with people like Nick Fuentes because they were already running in similar circles online. And so the whole Stop the Steal thing really came out of that world, right? This kind of world of incredibly online sort of pseudo-political influencers who kind of have some connections to some people, but are really building sort of a persona by online presence, right? And then having that sort of filter itself back in to having actual political power, or at least that's their hope. And how instrumental he was, very specifically, in making this whole series of events kind of play out. But now we're getting into a really interesting part of this. And this has to do with questions like, why did Nick Fuentes get very large cryptocurrency transfers in the days leading up to January 6th? What was the role of organizations like American Identity Movement or the remnants of American Identity Movement in this process, right? How did the Oath Keepers organize prior to January 6th? Because what they're trying to do now is they're trying to understand how far ahead of the election was there already a decision amongst operatives on the right wing to attempt to overthrow the results of the election if Trump lost. So what's really important about that is if they were planning at all before this, and we know that they were because there's PowerPoint presentations that were issued before early November. There were documents from Giuliani talking about strategy for how to win the election if you lose that were written in October. We have all of this documentation that demonstrates that really early on, they were already planning for something like this. That there was already this talk of a Stop the Steal campaign. In fact, the slogan Stop the Steal was actually coined by Roger Stone in relation to the 2016 election. So this is a thing that's been circulating around that part of the Republican Party and Republican circles for a while.
They had a test run for all this stuff in Florida during the midterms. And actually, it's going down as
yes,
really
they did.
Fascinating article about how they were, and again, this kind of goes back to our original thing we were talking about. They were largely going and targeting black churches that were pushing for a recount in the election there, and they were using the Proud Boys and other far-right groups to go and harass people and push back against protests and show up and, counter, different rallies and stuff like that, and to basically support in the streets the Republican candidates. So, I mean, it was a total trial run for January 6th in a lot of ways. And of course, Roger Stone is the person that was able to manifest the so-called Brooks Brothers riot back in...
It was the year 2000. Yeah, it was during the 2000 election. So think about this. Roger Stone was the person who more or less planned the Brooks Brothers riot in the year 2000 to stop the recounting of votes in Florida. He was also involved in these disruption campaigns to prevent a recount in the election where Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida, very likely could have lost if there was a recount to Andrew Gillum, who was his Democratic opponent. And now he's involved in doing this, and one of his primary sort of luminaries is involved in doing this, right? That kind of a strategy of manipulating the sort of media landscape and trying to cause these kinds of confrontations to prevent elections from sort of, having a legitimate count done. Stone was playing around with that kind of stuff during the Nixon campaign. I mean, you have to keep in mind, Roger Stone worked for Richard Nixon. And during the Nixon era, Stone was really responsible for, and in the proximity to three things that really foreshadow a lot of this. The first is when Nixon was running against Lyndon Johnson, there was a push from Republican operatives, Roger Stone being very young at this point, but in the circle of people pushing for this, for a strategy that the Nixon campaign ultimately adopted, which was for Henry Kissinger to, through a back channel, discuss with the North Vietnamese ceasing peace negotiations during the presidential campaign so Nixon could make the claim that he would end the war in Vietnam, and then have negotiations immediately after Nixon got elected, which would then end the war. So Henry Kissinger kept the war in Vietnam going on purpose to create a political advantage for Richard Nixon, and Roger Stone was part of the circle of Republican operatives that was involved in planning that strategy. Later, as the Nixon campaign sort of proceeded, as Nixon was running for re-election, Roger Stone was responsible for creating this, I forget the name of the group, but it was like a fake communist organization, essentially, like really out there, incredibly excessive, sort of Maoist-esque communist organization that only existed in name only, but it existed to give funding to Democratic politicians throughout the country, to make it look like the Democrats were tied in with these extreme communist groups. Stone also, in certain races, funded third candidates that he knew would take votes away from Democrats, which is entirely illegal to do. This is actually one of the things Kanye West is being investigated for right now, is that it's become very clear that his, quote, presidential campaign was funded entirely by people who were also funders of Donald Trump. And that if that was a coordinated strategy, that would be entirely illegal to do. But Stone was doing that stuff during the Nixon re-election. But the other thing that Roger Stone was involved in, never got indicted for it, but he was an unindicted co-conspirator, was Watergate. Roger Stone was involved on some level in planning the Watergate break-in. And so here's this guy who, for all intents and purposes, has a very, very, very long history of doing incredibly illegal things to take and hold on to power. And to do things which, for people that believe in elections, feel very anti-democratic, right? So the idea that he would do that in the year 2000, then that he would do it again in 2018, then that he would do it again in 2020, is not surprising at all, right? So the question becomes then, where did this planning start, right? And the answer to that question is going to be incredibly important as far as indictments go. If they can demonstrate that planning for this started prior to the election, not necessarily January 6th, but planning for a campaign to sort of overthrow the results of the election if Trump lost, if planning for that started before the election, if they had already built up this narrative of voter fraud before the election, which we know that they had because Trump was saying it from, the stage in any number of speeches he gave, starting in March of 2020, in March of 2020, he said, you know, I'll be willing to accept the election results if I win, right? And he was saying stuff like that months before the election. So we know that they were already thinking about that. If the commission can prove it, that's treason. That's literally treason. That is a plan to overthrow the U.S. government in a coordinated, top-down, hierarchical, organizational way. That's treason. That's really serious. And the reality of that is that I think we all know that that is exactly what happened here. Now, I want to draw a distinction because there's a really important distinction here, which will become really relevant when we talk about the midterms later. There's a distinction here between what I would consider to be political operatives, right? People like Roger Stone, people like Ali Alexander, even Alex Jones to a degree, right? And the sort of base, right? The people who showed up on January 6th. For the people who showed up on January 6th, what these operatives had done is they had primed the media landscape for these people to already think the election was stolen before it even happened, right? It was kind of, for those of us that can remember back to 2020, which feels like it was about 8,000 years ago, it was really obvious at the time that that's what was going on. It was impossible to not see it. It was right in front of us. And so if they can demonstrate that that was a coordinated effort, the people that were involved in that coordinated effort will get indicted, and indicted for really serious things. We're already seeing that a bit in the Oath Keepers case. So if you look at the Oath Keepers indictment, they don't start on January 6th. They don't even start in December. They start the day after the election. And in the indictment, they talk about, here's all these networks that were created before the election, which then got activated immediately after the election, right?
And Stuart Rhodes can't brush his teeth without saying there's going to be a civil war.
Well, he declared that there was going to be civil war when the federal government tried to ban bump stocks. I mean, it's like, come on, dude. It's like a piece of plastic on the back of your gun. Like, give it a break. Like, give it a rest. You know, like, that's not going to be the thing that starts a civil war. And the UN black helicopters aren't coming to take your guns. Like, come on. But that all aside, all of the hyperbole aside, what seems to be happening here is that they actually have some actual evidence that they are building from. You don't subpoena Patrick Casey unless you know that Patrick Casey has something to do with something that's potentially indictable or has information about things that would be. To even get to the point of assuming that Patrick Casey would have information like that, they already have to know a lot about how those networks work. Because in our world, someone like Patrick Casey is really important, right? Like in our world, someone like Patrick Casey was the leader of a fascist organization, and was a relevant person for us to be paying attention to. But if all you ever watch is MSNBC or CNN or Fox, you have no idea who that even is, right? You've never heard of this person. So most Congress people had never heard of this person either before this investigation started. So the fact that they're subpoenaing him, means that they know something. The fact that they're subpoenaing Nick Fuentes, I'll almost promise you that has to do with these cryptocurrency transfers that he received in the weeks leading up to January 6th, which I think totaled something like $250,000. This is a lot of money. And those cryptocurrency transfers came from France originally. So where was that money coming from, right? Those are the questions that they're trying to answer here. This is all about starting to wrap this thing up, right? So we're starting to watch the beginning of the end, where they're starting to really build a theory of case that can result in indictment. There's a number of other pitfalls for the right wing here, though. So, for example, someone like Patrick Casey exists in this weird space where, you know, he's trying to be legitimate within the Republican Party. He's also trying to be legitimate within the fringe right wing, like what's left over from the alt-right. And his tendency is to move more towards legitimacy, while Nick Fuentes, his tendency is to move more into like alt-right spaces. But they kind of are two sides of the same coin. The problem both of them are going to have is they're going to show up and they're going to have to testify. Unlike Mark Meadows, they don't have almost infinite resources to hire lawyers to push off subpoenas. Ali Alexander already was like, look, I'm going to have to go testify because I'm not rich. I don't have lawyers to fight this thing off. So I'm going to have to go testify. And so are the rest of these people. Now, for your normal political operatives, that's not a problem. You know, normal political operatives are ostensibly loyal to the federal government and they're just like existing within the political system. But for someone like Nick Fuentes, who isn't necessarily, I mean, they play a really great like narrative of patriotism and things, but underlying the intellectual, I don't want to even use the word intellectual, ideological trajectory that leads to someone like Nick Fuentes is a long history of the last 40 years of the right wing existing in what more or less is a state of war against the federal government, right? And that started before Oklahoma City. That started with the Posse Comitatus movement in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And so, and people like Nick Fuentes are very directly the ideological descendants of that. And so for someone like Nick Fuentes or Patrick Casey, whose, you know, sort of base of support is not necessarily, contrary to what they say outwardly, patriotic Americans, right? But is actually a fascist force that's trying to seize power. For those people to testify in front of Congress, is the end of their careers. And these are people that are already passing back and forth, you know, recriminations about being feds. And so just like in our circles, when somebody testifies in front of a grand jury, somebody snitches people out to the police, we lose trust in that person permanently, as we should, right? That is the same thing that's going to happen on the right wing as well. And so they're stuck in this hard place where they're not really necessarily going to be able to plead the fifth, right? Because they're not necessarily the target of the indictment. So Congress will give them immunity, right? They're not going to be able to just not say anything because they'll get held in contempt of Congress. They have to show up because otherwise there's going to be, you know, any number of federal authorities like out there trying to enforce the subpoena. They're stuck in a really difficult place right now. And this kind of dissension within the right wing right now, when the right wing is already weakened, when the right wing is already in a period of lull and already in a period in which there is a power struggle going on between different factions to sort of see which faction is going to rise to ascendancy, add this into the mix and this becomes a much more impactful thing than just the subpoena all of a sudden. And it impacts things on a number of different levels. And so what the Democrats and what the January 6th Commission are trying to do is they're trying to paint this picture, which I think is probably the accurate picture, that for years, there has been a sort of rising narrative within operative circles within Trumpism about how to make sure Donald Trump stays in power or how to make sure someone of that ilk stays in power regardless of how politically popular they are. And that January 6th was the outcome of that discussion, which very likely started years before that. And so again, if they can prove that, that's treason. And that's really serious. And that's the point at which you start to get people flipping on each other. Because the punishment for treason in the United States is everything up to execution. Most people that have been convicted of treason in the U.S. have either been sent to prison for life or executed. And that's a really severe penalty. Someone like Ali Alexander is not going to go to prison for life. Neither is Patrick Casey. They're going to flip and roll on people. And so we're going to watch not just this commission investigation play itself out, but we're going to watch this whole other dynamic in the fringe right play itself out. We have to add that on top of that, this Supreme Court decision that happened today. So a bunch of documents got subpoenaed from the Trump administration's archives. Trump did what he usually does. He claims executive privilege over the documents. He says, oh, well, nobody can see those. I was the president once at some point, and I'm saying no one can see my stuff. And just like normal, every judge that has ever heard a case like that is like, well, but you're not the president now, so you don't get to claim executive privilege because, you know, you're not the executive anymore. And that same thing happened in the Supreme Court today. Now, those documents, from what any of us know, from what we've been told, encompass campaign planning documents, administration strategy documents, funding documents, and documents that stretch back to the beginning of 2020. And the only reason
if it's anything like the coup PowerPoint, you know.
Yeah, well, the coup PowerPoint. So, yeah.
Here is how we do the crimes.
Yes, here's how we do the coup.
Crime
By the
plan
way, here's a bunch of
2020.
pictures with no backgrounds. I know. Well, and seriously, like, this is the thing that is increasingly mind-blowing to me. I think about how much people in our circles think about surveillance and think about repression because we've experienced it consistently for, you know, the last 100 years. Anarchists have been fighting government repression. The FBI literally was created to engage in repression against the anarchist movement. So, like, we have a very long history of engaging in counter surveillance, right? And being really concerned about surveillance. The right wing doesn't. Now, militia types do, sure. They're very paranoid. But these kind of alt-right types, or people that are kind of in that orbit, they always did everything out in the open. There's a sense in which there is a certain entitlement that they feel when they're doing things, where they don't have to be concerned about repression, where they just assume that everyone's going to be on their side, right? You saw this in January 6th, people storming up to police lines being like, you should just let us through. That's what your oath says. You should just let us through. And then being shocked when they got tear gas.
Imagine being in a world where you think a police officer's oath is just to, like, let you into somewhere you're not, I mean, like,
right?
It just, again, speaks volumes as to, like, who these people are. It's like, where did you grow up where, like, you can be in a violent mob of people and just, like, come up to police, like, armed with weapons that can hurt you and just be like, you need to let me into this thing I'm not supposed to be in. You took an, it's like, yeah. No, they didn't. They didn't take they're there to, like, prevent you from doing that. Like, yes, that's the whole reason they exist.
They were live streaming their crimes the whole time. And, like, people weren't wearing masks in the most heavily surveilled part of the entire country. That, and walking, I mean, just the sheer number of videos from that day where people are walking out of doors in the Capitol, like, holding their faces going, I can't believe they pepper sprayed us. What did you think was going to happen? You stormed a government building in the middle of a vote certification. What did you think was going to happen? They're very lucky that it wasn't way worse for them at that point. Like, I've been tear gassed in situations that are way less conflictual than that, right? Like, I've been tear gassed just for walking down the street in a march. For real, right?
Not only that, but, like, people get arrested. People get attacked in prison. Yes. People have been sexually assaulted in prison. People have been put in, you know, a prison other than the gender that they identify with. I mean, imagine that happening to you if you're this MAGA rioter.
And you see it in the Oath Keepers indictment too, right? So, like, the Oath Keepers' entire plan essentially was they were going to get, like, 40 people together with, like, 60 guns and fight the military. And it's like, okay, so they go into the Capitol on January 6th in a big crowd. Okay, that kind of makes sense. I mean, it's still a entirely misguided understanding of how power works, but kind of sort of makes sense. But the thing that really gets me is at 5 a.m. the next day, they were, quote, probing defenses and doing recon missions to attack the Capitol again, this time on their own, with 40 people. They thought they were going to be able to fight that entire contingent of the National Guard with 40 people.
Yeah. And this is all covered in the podcast that Robert Evans does. Yeah, that they were literally so convinced of themselves. They thought the insurrection was going to go on the second day and it was going to go even harder. And the dialogue in that recording is like listing, you remember when you were a kid, and I don't know if they still do this anymore, but, you know, you'd have action figures and you'd have, like, Saturday morning cartoon, and the kids would be playing with, like, wow, yeah, we're gonna get him, and, like, this guy's got a rocket launcher, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's literally what it sounds like. Like, there was one point where
they were gonna hijack
see those snow plows over there, Red Rooster? That's how we get out of here. We're gonna hotwire those snow plows, and we're going to get on the freeway. We're just going to go.
Well, and the thing is that indicates just a level of entitlement that borders on delusion. And that you see this throughout the entirety of this investigation, all of the kind of parallel investigations happening, none of these people hid anything. They put all this stuff on paper and they saved it on their computers. I mean, a lot of the Oath Keepers indictment, for example, is the result of the fact that of the 19 Oath Keepers that got arrested, 2 of them immediately rolled. And part of their plea agreements was handing over devices and passwords. Now, the Oath Keepers did, for example, use signal groups, invite-only signal groups, mind you, which, like, that's halfway decent OPSEC, but they forgot to turn disappearing messages on. So, of course, like, weeks later, as these people are getting arrested, they still have all the messages on their phones. They didn't even throw their phones away. They didn't use burner phones. They didn't destroy the chats, like, nothing. Some of them tried to. But of course, because other people got arrested with that content, everybody that was on that signal group that didn't have those messages on their phone got charged with destruction of evidence. Right? And it's like basic things that they were doing that just indicate this idea that they were going to be able to do this, they were going to win, and there were going to be 0 consequences for it. That is the part which really attaches heavily to this narrative of American history that gets laid out in this Assault on America podcast. Right? This idea that what was happening here really was almost this unmasking. It was sort of an exposure of what the real American state is. Right? Not in its kind of like fascist militaristic guise as a state, but as a white supremacist project. And how these people stormed into the Capitol with the notion that they were saving America by doing this thing, by engaging in this narrative which was overtly racist, by engaging in activity which, you know, a lot of them, if they were not members of fascist organizations, they were working directly alongside them, which was an openly planned attempt to overthrow the American government. It's like these people never read their history. And so what we're watching here is we're watching this kind of dismantling of a certain part of the right wing, but we're also watching this building of a narrative. And this is really where it starts to intersect with things like the midterm elections, right? What's happening right now is the story of January 6th is being written, essentially. Not rewritten, like Tucker Carlson's trying to do, but actually written. In the sense that, say, take an event like September 11th, okay? September 11th, though ostensibly seems relatively simplistic and straightforward, right? It's pretty obvious what the motivation of the people that did things were. It's pretty obvious what happened, right? But the actual complexity of that day and the time leading up to it and the time that came after it, that history is still being written to this day, 20 years later, right? That is the same thing that will be happening with January 6th. The history of this will become the subject of people's doctoral theses 3 decades from now. Because as we go forward, unlike, say, the far right in the 70s and 80s, which burned a lot of their documents, or didn't write things down to begin with, these people wrote everything down and saved it. And so we have this voluminous series of documents and testimonies that we can use. Now, a lot of liberals are really excited that people are going to go to jail, right? And really, I could really care. I don't care about that, right? Nobody deserves to be in prison. But one of the things that we're going to see here, and I've mentioned this before, but as these narratives sort of develop, as these documents get released, we've already gained this glimpse into a certain way that a kind of inflection point or kind of point of convergence exists within conservative circles between this kind of mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream part of the conservative movement, which is tied to the Republican Party, and this kind of fringe part of the conservative movement, which a lot of which comes from sort of either neo-Nazi or racist organization roots or comes from militia organizations, right? Many of which historically are very tied together in themselves. That's a part of the right wing that we haven't often gained a view into, right? That's a part of the right wing where the KKK sits down with the sheriff and plans something together, right? That's part of the right wing where, racist state legislatures who are tied to, racist organizations talk to senators about filibustering voting rights bills, right? That's a part of the right wing that for a long time was really quiet, where people didn't really talk about it, that everyone knew it was there if you were paying attention, but it wasn't talked about. And now there's no way to ignore it. That in fact, it's not even that is the convergence point of two other things. It's that is actually the campaign, is that point in the middle. That take someone like Wendy Rogers, Paul Gosar, right? Someone like that. Dan Crenshaw, right? Super right-wing politicians, Madison Cawthorn, right? Like people like this. Josh Hawley, right? You take these kinds of people and they do exist right at that convergence point. And they're taking these messages and they're propelling them into the discourse. And they're doing that very intentionally. And they're doing that. I mean, Wendy Rogers' profile picture on Twitter has the red, like, fash wave glowing eyes, which is a Nazi thing on the internet, right? That's not an accident. That part of the right wing has gotten a lot louder and a lot more overt. And that part of the right wing, as a consequence, is sort of revealing what it is. Yeah. And so that convergence point's interesting because what we're watching here is we're watching this sort of situation in which the kind of institutional Republican Party is kind of falling away. And the traditional structure of the conservative movement is kind of falling away. And what you've watched is this emergence from that point of convergence of this completely new thing, right? It's a new thing, which is also a very old thing, but it's something which is articulating itself with a level of force, which is actually really scary.
This has been the It's Going Down podcast. Check itsgoingdown.org for daily updates, columns, action reports, and news. Go to itsgoingdown.org/shop to support us and follow us on all social media platforms. IGD, your daily resource for insurgent proletarian life.